Hello and welcome back to another YouTube video. Today I'm doing a top lane tier list for patch 13.16. So if you enjoy my content, like and subscribe, and let's get into it. To begin with, this was a relatively small patch. There weren't a huge amount of changes which affected top lane. So a lot of these will be kind of like mid into top spillovers. Things like the Sylas, the Akali, Nafiri, Karma, Wukong, which was kind of targeted towards top lane, but still kind of affects jungle Wukong as it's his most popular role still. Shyvana also kind of affected in the top lane. So let's cover all of these changes. Nafiri is the first one I want to talk about. She is going to be a new addition to the top lane here. She had already been picking up a decent amount of play rate. The champ performs quite well within the top lane. She's going to send me A tier. However, but nerfs this patch do hurt her enough that she's no longer an S tier champion. However, in time, when people min-max her builds correctly and people learn the champ more effectively, then this champ should probably push back into the S tier. But for the moment, as long as you're building things like your Eclipse, your Cleaver, your Shrouders, you can go more Glass Cannon, things like your Edge, your Axiom, or you can go things like GA more as more defensive options. This champ performs really well. Her overall damage is really high. As long as you're snowballing, then you can really scale into the late game. You one-shot carries with relative ease as long as you're able to either break through a front line or just avoid them. She can have issues where her W does when your W is targeting an ADC or a squishy, something like the mage of the enemy team, and the tank then tries to interrupt it. Can cause issues, especially if you don't have things like your Cleaver and your Shrouders, which are really quite core items as you really value that armor pen. But overall, still performing quite well. Definitely a strong top lane pick. Can push into the S tier later on, but for the moment, it's going to be in the A tier. So Sylas is the next champ we'll talk about. Sylas got a 90 mana buff. Doesn't do a huge amount. You're only really seeing Sylas in the top lane into Malphite. This champ doesn't really see play past that. There are a couple of good ults, of course, you can steal in the top lane, but as an answer, mostly just going to be picked into Malphite as like a flex pick. The mana does help. It allows you to spam out more abilities, especially if you're running things like your first strike. There are options there. Even in the Conqueror build, when you're spamming spells to stack up your Conqueror, casting a lot of W's, stuff like this, it can really benefit that. Akali gained 5 damage on each of on her Q, both at base level and at max rank. The Q mana cost, the Q energy cost has gone from 130 to 90 to 110 to 90 as well, which is also a relatively big buff towards early game Akali. Doesn't really push her out of the C tier, she just performs a lot better within it. She still has a lot of really tough matchups in the top lane. Once again, you're not really picking this champion unless you're like really proficient at it, and you're making sure you're building correctly. None of this like Divine Cinder stuff, although it might be fun. Things like Full Glass Cannon just perform a lot better. Traditionally, you can go things like Riftmaker if you really need that durability, but I'd still definitely recommend either things like Night Harvester, Protobout, and then things like Shadow Flame, Rabadons, Magi's if you're snowballing. Stuff like this can be really beneficial on Akali. But yeah, only really play this champion if you're really proficient at it and going from a mid to top flex. Past that, I would kind of avoid it at the moment. Wukong got a load of mana buffs. His Q mana cost went from 40 down to 20. His W went from 80 to 40 to 60 to 40, I believe, and he gained a bit of base mana regen. So overall, relatively small buffs towards Wukong. The main one is the fact that his Q is a lot more spammable, having his mana cost reduced by half. But overall, this isn't going to change enough to make him suddenly rise up in the top lane. He is just going to stay in the B tier. He was kind of low to the C tier, but this kind of just solidifies his place in the B tier. He's a very mediocre top laner. If anything, he's still a bit on the weak side, but he can beat a lot of champions, especially with the armor built in on his passive. Allows him to beat a lot of the AD either tanks or juggernauts. He can struggle into a lot of the one-shot AD champions though, as he doesn't have a lot of upfront durability past things like maybe if you're itemizing things like maybe Death Stance and Plated Steel Caps, he can struggle. Karma is the next champ I want to talk about. This champ is probably also going to stay in the C tier. I don't see the buffs being enough to adjust her out of the C tier. They were quite nice for mid Karma if you're going more Glass Cannon, but in the top lane where you tend to go things like your Frostfire and Spirits and along that path, these don't really affect her that much as they were mostly just AP ratio buffs. However, if you are going more of the AP route and you're picking up things like Magi's, Dark Seal, maybe you're going like the Lost Chapter route with Ludens, supportive route, you could go things like, Moonstone, Echoes of Helia, even though these items don't perform particularly well at the moment on her. Things like Shredias can also function on Karma quite nicely. If you're going more supportive, that is probably her best supportive item at the moment. But things like a Redemption, still relatively good item on Karma. If you have a very AP heavy team with need of CDR, then of course stuff Flowing Water and attack speed value with Ardent Sensor. So there are build paths there, but for the most part, doesn't do a huge amount. It's going to leave her in the C tier. Shyvana, going to move down to the D tier. They've somehow managed to leave this champion in the dirt for 7 months, and then they buff her, give her life again for like a patch, and then they strip most of that away within the next patch, and then they realize that she was still too strong in low elo. So they've nerfed her again. She's now not great at all in the top lane. She's not also that great in the jungle anymore either. Overall, it just kind of sucks. This champion is desperately in need of an update, but we're not going to see that for like another 2 years. So I don't know what Riot's doing. What they should really do is just buff this champion early game, allow her to have a more competitive laning phase and jungle clear, and then allow her to scale not as hard into the late game, so she's more balanced of a champion. But Riot, with the update, made her even more low elo skewed, and now she's in this situation where she's just gonna struggle anywhere which isn't plat below. So I don't know what Riot's doing. It's a bit of a miss from them. It sucks because this champion just isn't good. Like, they really just needed to fix the issues rather than panicking and just instantly putting it back to a worse state than it was in. Jax, I'm going to move down to the A tier. This is the first non-patch related thing. Jax got nerfed a couple of patches ago. He lost like some base health and some E cooldown, I believe. Overall, didn't do a huge amount, but in time with a couple of the other adjustments, he does kind of drop down to the A tier. It does mean that he's a bit more reliant on Spirit Shogun as an item if you're going things like Triforce into Spirit Shogun or Divine Sinner into Spirit Shogun. I will always recommend Triforce over Divine Sinner at the moment. They have kind of killed Divine Sinner as an item, yet it still seems to be the most popular on things like Nasus, Jax, Camille. All these champions should be building Triforce. They are a lot stronger with these items. But Jax, still not bad, can function in Elite quite well, but for more mid and low elo, he's definitely kind of fallen off a bit, more towards the A and B tier. Yorick got some adjustments for Maiden last patch, and overall, the pet durability changes have kind of brought like Annie, Ivan, and Yorick down a tier. Of course, 2 of these aren't top lane champions, they are in their respective roles. But Yorick definitely going to drop down towards the C tier. Maiden is a little bit less durable, I believe, and overall means he kind of moves down. Along with a couple of item nerfs, I think he had a Duskblade variant which was performing well, but now that's going to kind of struggle a bit more with the nerfs towards Duskblade. But overall, just needs a bit of an adjustment, something to really breathe life into the champion. I hope they listen to Yorick mains, because a lot of them tend to have pretty strong ideas and core ideas of what they want to see the champ do and what they want to see the champ have. Would be good to see if they could change that. Same goes for Urgot, honestly. I hope they listen to Urgot mains, because right now the champ seems to be quite a concern. Like, really strong in low elo. People were complaining about like how strong it is in low elo, but then really falls off a cliff once you go Emerald, Diamond higher. So it'd be nice to see some level of adjustment there, whether it's just making him stronger early and then nothing his late, or whether it's just some overall adjustments making his W rather than a movement speed loss for something like a Self Slow, so Swifties have more value. Could be something along those lines. The other thing I want to talk about is don't sleep on Azir. I always talk about this because Azir is a champ you shouldn't sleep on. He is really good in the top lane at the moment. Quite a niche pick, has a lot of value in the fact that he does a huge amount of AP damage. You can keep a range. If I was to tell you to learn any champion at the moment, it would be Azir. You do have to put a lot of games into this champion though. He's really hard to pick up. Managing his soldiers correctly, using the shuffle correctly, and just being able to position him within team fights and getting the maximum use out of that is a really big skill in this champion. So definitely learn it and then kind of give your thought. And the last champion I want to talk about is Camille. Camille, really, really powerful at the moment, is probably the best top laner in the game. for the fact that she got huge buffs on her ultimate and a bit of AD ratio. If you're building the champ correctly, going for like your Triforce and your Ravenous, this champ is insane. 2 items, has kind of the core identity of top lane going on at the moment, where she can itemize into Hull Breaker and just split push and contest almost every other top laner in the game at the moment. There are some which can like have kind of niche interactions or are just direct counters, which you can struggle into, so make sure you are playing Camille into good matchups, but she's really strong at the moment. If you have the good matchups for Camille, this champ can just 1v9 games, huge amounts of damage, and really strong split push builds. So yeah, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next one. Goodbye.